All right, we're ready for lesson two, and we're on page 281 in your science book. Please get your science book out and get ready to follow along as we go through this lesson today. And so yesterday we were talking about animal habitats, their niches, the populations, and the ecosystems they live in, and the places they live. And we talked just a little bit about yesterday, what if there was a drought? How would it affect the population of an animal? And that kind of we're going to continue on with that thought today. The essential question is, how do environmental changes affect organisms? What if there was a fire, like it looks like maybe there was in this picture? How does that affect the organisms, the living things in that ecosystem? So we'll answer that question today as we go through this lesson. Change comes naturally. All environments change over time. Some changes happen slowly, while others happen quickly. Over hundreds of thousands of years, mountains weather and erode. Rivers cut canyons into rock and change course through valleys and plains. Gradual changes like these affect the organisms that live in environments. Weather patterns change over time as well. Like changes to the land, climate changes affect organisms. What's climate? Climate is the amount of rainfall and temperature and kind of the weather in an area. Weather and climate are different. But climate's like the weather over a long period of time in an area. Throughout Earth's history, the average temperature has gone up and down many times. An ice age happens when Earth's temperatures are colder than normal for a very long time. Large areas of land are covered with ice for thousands of years. During warm climate cycles, ice melts and uncovers land. During the last ice age, ice nearly 4 kilometers thick covered much of North America. Because the ice held so much frozen water, the levels of the ocean dropped and coastlines changed. Earth is now in a warming cycle. Many scientists think that this warming trend will continue and is part linked to human activities. It's unclear how warming might affect the planet as a whole. As some areas become warmer, the organisms that inhabit those areas will move, adapt to the change, or disappear. Many things can happen to change environments quickly as well. Heavy storms can cause floods that wash away land. Mudslides can destroy years of plant growth in minutes. Volcanic eruptions can be destructive, but they can also form entirely new land that will eventually be inhabited by plants and animals and become an ecosystem. Let's take a look at some of these pictures here. Volcanic eruptions can quickly change the environment. Centuries of forest growth and the wildlife that live in it can be destroyed within hours. You ever seen a video of a volcano? It just can blow the side of a mountain off even. A drought occurs when little rain falls. So without water, plants and animals will disappear. So these environmental changes, these changes in the temperature or caused by something natural like a volcano, they affect the ecosystems and the animals that live there, plants that live there, and so they change. Next, please. Ecosystems change all the time, but the changes are often so slow that they're hard to notice. The picture below shows how bare rock can change into an ecosystem filled with living things. The gradual change of organisms in an ecosystem is called succession. Oh, there's one of those words you'll need to know. Gradual change of organisms in an ecosystem is called succession. Primary succession begins on bare rock, such as after a volcano erupts. Dust settles in cracks in the rock. The first organisms to colonize are called pioneer species. Lichens, like a little moss type thing, are common pioneers. They break down the rock as they grow, producing soil. When they die, their litter decays, adding nutrients to the soil. As soil develops, plants can begin to grow. Mosses flourish, and they help produce more soil. The soil becomes thicker and bigger plants take hold. Eventually, trees grow. A mature, stable community establishes itself. It can take hundreds of years for a stable community to establish itself. Where water is plentiful, succession, or changing from rocks to a healthy ecosystem, where water is plentiful, succession can happen more quickly. Even mature, stable communities continue to change. So that sounds kind of confusing, succession, but it's not. Think about your driveway. Sometimes we get cracks in your driveway at home where you ride your bike. What grows in those cracks? Have you ever noticed? Unless your dad sprays and kills the weeds, little plants will start growing in the cracks of your driveway. They'll start growing in concrete, plants will, because just a little dirt is blown into that crack and a little plant can start growing. And if they stay there, they can cause that crack to get bigger and more dirt can get in and more plants start growing. This happens over a long time, of course. And they get bigger, more plants start growing until eventually your driveway would look like that. That would take a long, long, long time, but it could happen. It's called succession, changing from this to this. Secondary succession occurs where an ecosystem has been disturbed, but the soil is still present. Areas burned by forest fires undergo secondary succession. Secondary succession occurs more quickly than primary succession. The existing soil usually contains seeds and roots that sprout and grow after the fire is over. The first plants to grow tend to be hardy shrubs and grasses. Gradually, larger plants colonize the burned area. Animals also return. Eventually, a stable ecological community reestablishes itself. So the difference between this would be like volcano, it destroys just rock, okay? And then it has to start from rock, start from scratch. No dirt, no soil, until some starts blowing in, filling in the cracks, and then things start growing. That's primary succession. Secondary succession is when everything's been burned, but the soil is already there, like after a fire. Then it starts growing. That happened in Gatlinburg a couple years ago, didn't it? For better or worse, living things change the places where they live. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it depends on your point of view. Organisms that live in an environment can cause huge changes. Changes can be both harmful and helpful. For example, when beavers make a dam, they cut down many trees that provide food and shelter for other living things. In addition, the dam slows the flow of the water, which affects animals that rely on faster flowing water to live. On the other hand, the dams produce wetlands, which provides homes for other organisms. So if you're a frog, you probably like the beavers building a dam because it gives you more water to swim in, because it forms a little pond. But if you're a bird living in the tree the beavers chop down with their teeth, you don't like those beavers too much because they cut down your habitat, your home. Sometimes changes harm an ecosystem, or they can even harm humans. When large number of algae appear in bodies of water, produced rapidly, the algae release large amounts of harmful chemicals into the water and cause oxygen levels to drop. The resulting condition is known as red tide, looks like it right here, which can kill fish and other wildlife and poison people. When beaches experience red tides, officials post signs warning people to stay out of the water. It's caused by algae. The algae that make up a red tide release harmful chemicals and use up the oxygen that fish need to breathe. I wouldn't want to get in that water anyway, would you? Beavers change their environment by building dams across streams. The dams cause flowing water to back up and form ponds. These changes create environments where new plants and animals can establish themselves. You see the pond that's formed here from the beavers? Invasive species. You may have seen a movie where space aliens invaded Earth. Invasions happen on Earth every day. Here's what happens when a new species moves into an environment. Sometimes the population of a species grows quickly after it's introduced into a new environment. This type of organism is called an invasive species. Invasive species take food and space away from native species. The organism already live in an ecosystem. The factors that limit the growth of the native species, such as predators, pests, and diseases, do not affect invasive species. The two species compete for resources. If no other species in the ecosystem can use the invasive species for food, there's no limit to its expansion. Invasive species often threaten less competitive organisms that have lived in an environment for a long time. Okay, that sounds like a lot of hard stuff. Invasive, think of the word invaders. They sneak in and they start taking over. So let's say, what we have be an invasive species around here. So let's say that all of a sudden moose started living in Tennessee. Well, is there anything in Tennessee that's going to eat a moose? No. maybe people, but that's it. So the moose wouldn't have any predators to hunt it down. It would grow and grow and grow, and there would be so many moose if they could live in this ecosystem that they would just be plentiful and they would take over, and the deer would have less to eat because the moose are eating the same thing the deer are eating. So they're competing for food, but nothing is going to be hurting the moose because nothing's big enough to eat a moose in this area. You see what I'm saying? So there's no moose here. So if they were put here and they started taking over, they would be called an invasive species. That's probably a silly example, but it's the first one on my mind. Population of native harvester ants have been destroyed as invasive fire ants move into the harvester ants' habitats and successfully compete with them for resources. So you got regular ants being invaded by fire ants and competing with them for resources. And so the regular ants were native harvester ants are going down. Zebra mussels are invasive to North America. They were accidentally carried into the Great Lakes in the hulls of ocean-going ships. Zebra mussels now grow in such large populations that they totally cover surfaces, block water outlets, and clog pipes in the lakes they've invaded. There's some zebra mussels. They must grow really fast. The brown anole is an invasive species of lizard brought into Florida, where populations of green anoles were common. Brown anoles quickly began to populate the region, competing for food with green anoles. Fewer predators ate brown anoles, so native green anoles died out. There's the brown ones, there's the green ones. Plants can be invasive too. Japanese honeysuckle grows quickly. It covers the ground with thick tangles of vines and leaves. A full-grown honeysuckle uses large amounts of water and blocks sunlight, preventing native plants from growing. Originally planted in gardens, Japanese honeysuckle spread beyond the gardens where it had been planted when birds in the wind carried its seeds into the natural environment. So, two examples of plants and animals. The animals here, this little green anole lived in Florida. The brown one didn't, but someone brought the browns in and they took over. Not many people ate the brown, not many other animals ate the brown ones, but they ate the green ones, so the green ones are gone because the brown ones were an invasive species. Plants kind of works the same way. Look at this Japanese honeysuckle taking over. Nothing else can grow there because it's hogging all the sunlight and all the water. It's an invasive species. Humans change the environment. Humans are not outside of the environment. We have a large impact on our ecosystems. The effects of humans on the environment can be both harmful and beneficial. Human activities can harm an ecosystem. For example, people mine coal to produce energy for homes and businesses. Open pit mining, as shown here, kills all the plants living in the area where the mine is dug. Animals that depend on the plants for food must move. Highways can also disrupt ecosystems. Land must be cleared of plants and animals before a highway can be built. Often hills get leveled and valleys get filled in, blocking streams. Communities of plants and animals that lived in the ecosystem can no longer survive. Humans produce a large amount of waste that's disposed of as trash. Most trash ends up in landfills. If landfills are not built properly, waste can pollute the soil and water. Pollution is the contamination of air or water or soil by substances harmful to organisms. So if you were to go over down to South Morristown and go to the landfill, you could see mountains. It almost looks like this. Sorry, keep getting phone calls today. It almost looks like this. It looks like mountains of dirt. And what's under there is buried trash. The trash is just buried under hills and hills of dirt. The landfill, boy, it affects the environment a whole lot. We have changed it with the landfill. Think about where you're sitting right now. Under the floor, under the concrete, under the basement, wherever of your house, used to be a place where animals can live, and you took it away and built your own house there. So we change the environment, don't we, all the time, by building things and building roads, building buildings, parking lots. We change the environment. Not all changes caused by humans are harmful. People work to protect their environment and to protect organisms from harm as a result of ecosystem change. Protecting ecosystems and the organisms living in them is called conservation. People try to restore habitats and repair damaged ecosystems by replanting trees and cleaning up pollution. People also remove invasive plants and animals so native organisms can survive. In addition, people try to help organisms affected by natural disasters. People care for animals injured or orphaned by these disasters. So yeah, have you ever seen somebody just driving down the road with a McDonald's bag and they just throw it out their window in the car? That's pollution. Don't do that. I hope nobody in your family does that because you're throwing trash in the ecosystem where an animal might eat it and die. So don't do that. Don't be a polluter, but be somebody who picks it up and helps clean the earth. Plant some trees in your yard. That gives a habitat for birds and insects. Well, back again. That's like 4 phone calls in one lesson, isn't it? Lots of phones ringing off the hook today. Well, so we were finishing up here talking about how we can protect the environment. You can do bad things to the environment. You can harm it or you can help it. Let's be people who can help the environment, protect ecosystems, the organisms living in them. Then we're a conserver. It's called conservation. All right. So you're going to have a little quiz today. You might want to work through these pages in your book. I see lots of words there. You're probably going to see a bunch of those on your quiz today. So it might help you to look through these, work through some of these as you get ready for your little quiz on today's lesson. Okay. All right. We'll do lesson 3 tomorrow. See you then.